The thunder cracked like a bullwhip across the darkened sky as Catherine Zimmerman pushed open the door to her isolated cabin, only to find a trail of crimson droplets staining her wooden porch. Montana Territory, 1876, a place where survival demanded grit and mercy often came at a price. The pelting rain nearly drowned out the ragged breathing coming from the shadows beside her rocking chair, but her keen ears caught it nonetheless. Gripping her father's old shotgun tighter, she edged forward, lamplight finally revealing a slumped figure, a man, broad-shouldered and clearly wounded, his hat pulled low but not concealing the blood seeping through his soaked shirt. "Don't shoot," he rasped, raising a trembling hand. Water cascaded from his drenched form, mixing with the blood pooling beneath him. Catherine stepped closer, her skirts swishing against the floorboards. The stranger's face lifted just enough for her to glimpse intense eyes beneath the brim of his hat. She recognized the look, a hunted man. Despite her better judgment, she lowered her shotgun. "Sit down," she commanded, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "You're not going anywhere." The wounded cowboy attempted to stand, swaying dangerously. "Madam, I can't stay." "They'll sit," Catherine repeated with more force, gesturing toward her kitchen table. "Or bleed out trying to leave. Your choice." Rain hammered against the roof as silence stretched between them. Finally, with a grunt of pain, the stranger limped toward the offered chair and collapsed into it. Catherine worked quickly, stoking the fire and heating water while keeping her shotgun within reach. The man remained silent, watching her with wary eyes as she gathered clean cloths and her mother's old medical kit. "I'm Quinn Ingram," he finally said, wincing as he removed his sodden jacket to reveal a deep gash across his upper arm and what looked like a bullet wound in his side. "And I've brought trouble to your doorstep, I'm afraid." "Wouldn't be the first time trouble found Marysvale," Catherine responded dryly, approaching with her supplies. "Or me." The cabin walls seemed to close in as she worked, thunder punctuating the tense silence while she cleaned his wounds. Quinn Ingram was no ordinary drifter. The calluses on his hands spoke of hard work, but the weathered holster at his hip told another story altogether. "Who shot you, Mr. Ingram?" Catherine asked, pressing a clean cloth against his bleeding side. His jaw tightened. "Men who'll come looking. Which is why I need to leave once this rain lets up." Catherine met his gaze directly. "Not until I've patched you properly. You won't make it a mile in this condition." The fire crackled between them as something unspoken passed in that moment. Trust, fragile as morning frost, began to form. "I don't want to endanger you," Quinn murmured, his voice softer now. Catherine's hands never faltered as she threaded a needle. "I've been endangering myself just fine on my own for years now." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "Now this is going to hurt." Quinn gripped the table edge as she began stitching his wounds, his knuckles white but no sound escaping his clenched teeth. Outside, the Montana storm raged on, masking any approaching danger for the moment. Neither could have known that this rain-soaked encounter would forever alter both their destinies, binding them together in ways that bullet wounds and blood-stained floorboards could only begin to tell. Dawn broke reluctantly through the lingering storm clouds, casting Catherine's cabin in a pale gray light. She'd spent most of the night in her rocking chair, shotgun across her lap, watching both the wounded cowboy who slept fitfully on her bed and the windows for any sign of pursuers. Quinn stirred with a groan, immediately reaching for his side before fully awakening. His eyes flew open, instantly alert despite the fever that had colored his cheeks during the night. "You're still here," he observed, voice rough from sleep. Catherine rose, setting her shotgun against the wall. "It's my home. Where else would I be?" A hint of a smile touched his lips before pain chased it away. "I meant you didn't leave me to fend for myself." I'm not in the habit of abandoning half-dead men, she replied, moving to check his bandages. Though you're the first I've dragged in from the rain. His wound had bled through the bandage, but less than she'd feared. When her fingers brushed against his skin to replace the dressing, she noticed his sharp intake of breath. "Sorry," she murmured. "Don't be," Quinn answered softly. "Your hands are gentle for someone so fierce." Catherine felt heat rise to her cheeks and turned away, busying herself with brewing coffee. "You should eat something. Then we need to talk about who's hunting you." Quinn managed to sit up, grimacing with the effort. "I'm not sure you want to know." "I'm sure I don't," she agreed. "But since they might come knocking at my door, I believe I'm entitled to the truth." The coffee bubbled on the stove as Quinn gathered his thoughts. Catherine noticed how his eyes constantly drifted to the windows, scanning the tree line visible through the parting rain. "I worked for the Hartley Ranch," he began. "Started as a regular hand 2 years ago, worked my way up to foreman." Catherine nodded. Everyone in Marysville knew of the Hartley spread the largest ranch in this part of Montana Territory, owned by Jasper Hartley, a man whose wealth was matched only by his ruthlessness. "Mr. Hartley has some unusual business arrangements," Quinn continued carefully. "I turned a blind eye longer than I should have. When I finally couldn't anymore, I found evidence of what he's been doing." "And what would that be?" Catherine prompted when he fell silent. Quinn's expression darkened. "Rustling, land theft, murder." "Hartley's been forcing smaller ranchers out, one way or another. He killed the Petersons last month, made it look like an Indian attack." Catherine gasped. She'd heard about the Peterson family. Their burned-out homestead had sent shockwaves through the scattered community. "I found ledgers," Quinn continued. "Names, dates, proof enough to hang him." I confronted him, thinking foolishly he might have explanations. A bitter laugh escaped him. Instead, he set his men on me. I barely got away with my life in those papers. Catherine absorbed this information, her mind racing. Jasper Hartley was not only the most powerful man in the county, he was also close friends with the territorial judge. "These men tracking you, they're Hartleys." Quinn nodded grimly. "3 of them. Led by Vance Maxwell, Hartley's right-hand man. They won't stop until they find me. And the evidence." Catherine moved to the window, peering out at the sodden landscape. The rain had dwindled to a light drizzle, and visibility was improving by the minute. "You can't travel yet," she said firmly. "Not with that bullet wound. They'll run you down before you make 10 miles. Quinn shook his head. "I won't bring this danger to your door. Once I can stand properly." "You'll what?" Catherine challenged. "Bleed to death in the wilderness, get caught and killed." "What happens to justice for the Petersons then?" Their eyes locked in silent combat. Catherine had lived alone since her father passed 3 years ago, working their small plot of land and occasionally selling medicines made from her mother's old recipes. Solitude had become her companion, independence her strength. Yet something about this wounded cowboy stirred emotions she'd long buried. Compassion, certainly, but something else too, something dangerous. "You don't even know me," Quinn said softly. "I know enough," Catherine replied. "I know you're risking your life to do what's right. That tells me more about a man than years of acquaintance sometimes can." A commotion outside broke the moment, the distinct sound of horses approaching. Quinn attempted to stand, reaching instinctively for his gun belt hanging near the bed. "Stay down," Catherine commanded, grabbing her shotgun. "And be quiet." Heart pounding, she moved to the window, carefully peering through the worn curtain. 3 riders approached slowly down the muddy path to her cabin, their slickers shining wet in the morning light. "It's them," Quinn whispered, his face pale. Catherine's mind raced. She couldn't outgun 3 men, but perhaps she wouldn't have to. Quickly, she turned to Quinn. "Get under the bed. Now." While he painfully complied, she grabbed his bloodied clothes and stuffed them into her stove, then hastily wiped away the worst of the blood from her floor with a rag. Just as boots thudded on her porch, she tossed Quinn's gun belt under a loose floorboard beneath her rocking chair. The knock came hard and demanding. Catherine took a deep breath, arranged her features into a mask of innocent irritation, and opened the door. 3 men stood on her porch, water dripping from their hats. The leader, a tall man with cold eyes and a star pinned to his vest, stepped forward. "Madam," he touched his hat. "Vance Maxwell. I'm deputized by Judge Holbrook to track down a dangerous fugitive. Wondering if you've seen any strangers passing through." Catherine crossed her arms, blocking the doorway. "No strangers. Haven't seen anyone in weeks." She gestured to the muddy ground around her isolated cabin. "As you can see, I don't get many visitors this far from town." Maxwell's eyes narrowed as he peered past her into the cabin. "Mind if we look around? Man we're after is wounded. Might be seeking shelter." "I mind very much," Catherine replied firmly. "My father didn't raise me to let strange men wander through my home, badge or no badge." One of the other men, younger and jumpy-looking, spoke up. "Trail led this way, Vance. Fresh blood in the mud back yonder." Maxwell's hand moved casually to rest on his gun. "That's so. Well, madam, that gives us cause to have a look inside. Stand aside." Catherine didn't move. "You show me a proper search warrant, Mr. Maxwell, and I'll happily oblige. Otherwise, this conversation is over." The tension stretched between them like a drawn bowstring. Catherine was acutely aware of Quinn hidden beneath her bed, likely hearing every word. Maxwell's mouth twisted into something between a smile and a sneer. "Proper? Out here. Proper is whatever I say it is." The third man, bearded and bulky, stepped closer. "Let's just look, Vance. Woman's hiding something." Catherine's finger moved to the shotgun's trigger, but she kept the barrel pointed downward. "Last warning, gentlemen. This is my property." Maxwell stared at her for a long moment before something changed in his expression. He stepped back, touching his hat again. "Very well, Miss Zimmerman, Catherine Zimmerman. Miss Zimmerman, we'll respect your privacy, for now." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "But we'll be watching this area. That fugitive is a dangerous man. Killed one of our ranch hands before fleeing. If you see anything suspicious, you ride into Marysvale and let the sheriff know immediately." Catherine nodded curtly. "I can handle myself, Mr. Maxwell. Good day to you." The men retreated reluctantly to their horses. As they mounted up, Maxwell called back, "We'll be at the crossroads for the night, just in case you remember something helpful." Catherine stood in the doorway, watching until they disappeared around the bend before closing and bolting her door. Her hands trembled slightly as the danger of the moment fully registered. Quinn emerged painfully from beneath the bed, his face ashen. "You shouldn't have done that. If they'd searched—" "But they didn't," Catherine cut him off, helping him back onto the bed. "And now we know where they'll be tonight." Quinn looked at her with newfound respect and concern. "You're either the bravest woman I've ever met or the most foolish." "My father always said there wasn't much difference between the two," Catherine replied with a small smile. "Now, we need a plan." "You can't stay here. They'll be back with a warrant next time, or worse." "I need to get to Fort Benton," Quinn said. "There's a federal marshal there who isn't in Hartley's pocket, if I can get him the evidence." Catherine nodded thoughtfully. "Fort Benton is nearly 100 miles north." "You can't make that journey alone in your condition." Their eyes met, and understanding passed between them. "No," Quinn said firmly. "I won't let you risk yourself further." Catherine began gathering supplies, her mind already made up. "Mr. Ingram, I stopped letting men tell me what I can and cannot do when my father died. Besides," she added with determined practicality, You need a guide who knows the back trails, and I need to collect spring herbs for my medicines anyway. You're proposing to come with me?" Quinn asked incredulously. "I'm proposing to keep you alive long enough to see justice done," Catherine corrected him. "We'll leave after nightfall. There's an old trapper's trail that runs north through the foothills. Maxwell and his men won't know it." Quinn watched her move efficiently around the cabin, packing provisions and medicines. Despite his protestations, relief showed clearly on his face. "Why are you helping me?" he asked quietly. "You don't know me. This isn't your fight." Catherine paused, considering the question seriously. "When the Petersons were killed, everyone whispered about injustice, but no one stood against it. My mother always said that evil triumphs when good people do nothing." She met his gaze directly. "I'm choosing not to do nothing, Mr. Ingram." Something unspoken passed between them, then a connection deeper than circumstance, stronger than the danger that surrounded them. For the first time since he'd stumbled onto her porch, Quinn Ingram smiled fully, transforming his weather-beaten face. "Quinn," he said softly, "if we're going to be fugitives together, you might as well call me Quinn." Catherine returned his smile, ignoring the unexpected flutter in her chest. "Then you should call me Catherine." As dusk approached, they prepared for the journey ahead, both aware that once they left the sanctuary of the cabin, there would be no turning back. The night enveloped them like a protective cloak as Catherine led her horse from the small barn behind her cabin. She had prepared everything meticulously: food, medical supplies, ammunition, and the few valuables she couldn't bear to leave behind. Quinn followed with painful slowness, his face tight with determination as he fought against his wounds. "Can you ride?" Catherine whispered, securing her packs to the saddle. Quinn nodded grimly. "I've ridden with worse." At her skeptical look, he amended, "Well, perhaps not worse, but I'll manage." "We'll share Maple," Catherine decided, patting her sturdy brown mare. "She's strong enough for two, and we'll make better time than if we tried to lead a second horse through the narrow trails." Quinn didn't argue, which told Catherine more about his true condition than his brave words. She helped him mount first, then swung up behind him, reaching around to take the reins. The closeness was unavoidable, her chest pressed against his back, her arms encircling him to hold the reins. Catherine was thankful for the darkness that hid her flushed cheeks. "We'll head east first," she murmured close to his ear, "to throw off anyone watching. Then cut north through Blackwood Ravine once we're sure we're not followed." Quinn tensed slightly. "Blackwood Ravine? Isn't that Crow territory?" "The treaty placed it in territorial lands 5 years ago," Catherine explained as they moved silently away from the cabin. "But yes, hunting parties sometimes pass through. I've traded with them before medicinal herbs for furs. They've left me in peace." "You're full of surprises, Miss Zimmerman," Quinn said with quiet admiration. "Catherine," she corrected gently. They rode in silence for the next hour, staying under the tree canopy whenever possible to avoid being silhouetted against the night sky. Quinn remained stoically quiet, though Catherine could feel the tension in his body as they navigated the rough terrain. Occasionally his breath would catch when the horse's movement jarred his wounds. "We should rest," she finally suggested as they reached a small creek. "You need to conserve your strength." Quinn started to protest, but relented when Catherine firmly reined in the horse. She helped him dismount, noting with concern how heavily he leaned on her. While Maple drank from the creek, Catherine checked Quinn's bandages by moonlight. The bullet wound had begun seeping again, the bandage stained dark. "You're reopening it," she chided softly, replacing the dressing with practiced hands. "Occupational hazard of fleeing for one's life," Quinn attempted humor, though his voice was strained. Catherine glanced up at his face, noting the lines of pain around his eyes. Without thinking, she reached up to brush a lock of dark hair from his forehead. Her fingers lingered for a moment against his skin. "You're feverish," she murmured. Quinn caught her hand in his. "I'll be fine," he insisted, but didn't release her hand immediately. "Catherine." Something in his voice changed, grew softer. "If something happens, it won't," she interrupted firmly. "If it does," he continued, "the evidence is sewn into the lining of my saddle bags." "Promise me you'll get it to Fort Benton." Catherine nodded solemnly. "I promise, but it won't come to that." A rustling in the brush nearby made them both freeze. Quinn instinctively pushed Catherine behind him, reaching for his gun despite his weakened state. The moonlight revealed nothing but shadows among the trees. "Probably just a deer," Catherine whispered, though her heart raced. "Maybe," Quinn agreed, but his hand remained on his weapon. "We should move on." They continued their journey through the night, the terrain growing steadily more rugged as they approached the foothills. Catherine guided them confidently, though even she was challenged by navigating the unfamiliar shadows of nighttime. By the time first light began to bleed into the eastern sky, they had covered nearly 15 miles of difficult country. Catherine found a sheltered overhang among a cluster of boulders. "We'll rest here during daylight," she decided. "Traveling by night is safer." Quinn practically collapsed when she helped him down from the saddle, his strength finally giving out. Alarmed, Catherine eased him to the ground and quickly spread her bedroll for him. "I'm sorry," he muttered, clearly frustrated by his weakness. "Don't be," she replied, helping him lie back. "You've been shot and ridden all night. Most men would have given up long ago." After securing Maple in a patch of grass nearby, Catherine returned to find Quinn shivering despite the growing warmth of the morning. She touched his forehead. The fever had worsened. "Here," she said, retrieving a small packet from her medical supplies. She crushed dried herbs between her fingers and mixed them with water from her canteen. "Drink this. It will help with the fever." Quinn complied without protest, grimacing at the bitter taste. "What is it?" "Willow bark, echinacea, and a few other things my mother taught me about," Catherine explained, settling beside him. "She learned from a crow healer when she first came to Montana." Quinn studied her face in the growing light. "You're not what I expected to find at the end of that storm." Catherine smiled softly. "And what did you expect, Mr. Quinn Ingram?" "Certainly not an angel with a shotgun and healing hands," he replied, his usual reserve softened by fever and exhaustion. The unexpected compliment brought warmth to Catherine's cheeks. She busied herself adjusting his blanket. "You should rest while you can. We have a long journey ahead." Quinn caught her hand again, his grip surprisingly strong. "Thank you," he said simply, the words carrying the weight of everything he couldn't express. Catherine nodded, suddenly unable to trust her voice. As Quinn drifted into fitful sleep, she remained vigilant, watching the surrounding wilderness for any sign of pursuit while contemplating the strange turn her life had taken. 2 days ago she had been alone, her world confined to her small cabin and garden. Now she was fleeing across the wilderness with a wounded man she barely knew, risking everything for a cause that wasn't her own. Yet somehow, it felt right. For the first time since her father's death, Catherine felt truly alive. As the sun climbed higher, she allowed herself to study Quinn's face in repose. Despite the lines of pain and the stubble darkening his jaw, she could see a gentleness there that contradicted his dangerous circumstances. What kind of cowboy risked everything to stand against injustice? Not the kind she'd encountered before. She wondered about the life he'd led before Hartley Ranch, about the circumstances that had shaped him into a man willing to sacrifice himself for what was right. There was more to Quinn Ingram than met the eye, a complexity that both intrigued and unsettled her. Catherine's thoughts were interrupted by the distant but unmistakable sound of horses approaching. Her heart lurched as she peered cautiously from their hiding place. Through the trees, perhaps a mile away across the valley they'd traversed, she spotted 3 riders following their trail. Maxwell had found them sooner than she'd expected. Much sooner. Catherine woke Quinn with a gentle but urgent hand over his mouth. His eyes flew open, instantly alert despite his fever. "They've found our trail," she whispered. "We need to move now." Pain flashed across Quinn's face as he forced himself upright. "How close?" "Too close." "About a mile back," Catherine replied, already gathering their belongings. "They'll reach this spot within the hour." Quinn checked his gun with hands that trembled slightly from fever. "Go ahead without me. I'll hold them off while you escape." Catherine shot him a withering glare. "That's a foolish plan and you know it. You'd last about 5 minutes in your condition." "Better me than both of us," Quinn argued. "We're not separating," Catherine stated with finality as she helped him to his feet. "There's a hunting cabin about 3 miles north of here. If we can reach it, we might find supplies, and a better defensive position if it comes to that." Quinn looked like he wanted to argue further but swayed unsteadily on his feet, undermining any case he might make. Wordlessly, Catherine helped him mount Maple, then swung up behind him. Instead of following the established game trail, Catherine guided them directly up the rocky slope behind their shelter. The going was treacherous, with loose shale and steep inclines that forced them to dismount and lead Maple at several points. Quinn struggled visibly, his breathing labored and sweat beading on his pale face despite the cool morning air. "Are you sure about this route?" he finally asked as they paused for him to catch his breath. Catherine nodded. "The rocks won't hold tracks. And there's a stream at the top we can follow for a while. The water will hide our trail." Quinn studied her with newfound respect. "You know your way around these hills better than most guides I've met." "My father was a trapper before he settled down," Catherine explained as they continued climbing. "He taught me everything he knew about surviving in the wilderness." When they reached the ridge, Catherine's prediction proved correct. A small stream cascaded down from the higher elevations. They followed it upstream, walking Maple through the shallow water for nearly a mile before finally emerging onto a pine-covered plateau. "The cabin should be just beyond that stand of aspens," Catherine said, pointing ahead. As they approached, however, her heart sank. What had once been a sturdy hunting cabin was now little more than a burned-out shell. The roof had collapsed entirely, and only 2 walls remained partially standing. "Looks like lightning strike," Quinn observed, surveying the charred timbers. "Happened last summer from the weathering." Catherine dismounted, trying to hide her disappointment. "We'll need to keep moving then." Quinn shook his head. "No, this is still defensible, and I need," he broke off, clearly unwilling to admit weakness. "Rest," Catherine finished for him. "You need rest or you won't make it to nightfall." She helped him down and settled him in a sheltered corner where the 2 remaining walls met. The area was dry at least, protected from the elements by what little roof structure remained. Quinn leaned back against the rough logs, his face gray with exhaustion. Catherine unsaddled Maple and secured her where she could graze on the spring grass. Returning to Quinn, she found him examining the papers hidden in his saddlebags. "Names, dates, locations," he explained, carefully spreading the documents on a flat stone. "Everything Hartley didn't want anyone to see." Catherine knelt beside him, scanning the pages. Her eyes widened as she recognized names, families who had mysteriously left the territory, homesteaders found dead under suspicious circumstances, cattle transactions that made little sense. "He's been doing this for years," she breathed. "How did no one notice?" "People noticed," Quinn corrected grimly. "They were either paid off or silenced." He pointed to one name on the list. Sheriff Davis in Marysville gets a monthly payment, Judge Holbrook too. Catherine felt sick. The entire system of justice she'd believed in was corrupted at its core. This explains why Maxwell had a deputy's badge, she realized. There's no one to stop them. Quinn nodded. Except us. The simple statement hung between them, a declaration of purpose that bound them together more surely than their shared flight. Catherine found herself studying Quinn's face again, seeing beyond the pain and exhaustion to the determination that drove him. Why did you decide to stand against them? She asked softly. You must have known what it would cost you. Quinn was silent for a long moment. I watched my family lose everything to men like Hartley back in Texas, he finally said. My father was a small rancher, refused to sell when larger outfits wanted our water rights. One night, masked men rode in. His voice hardened. They hung my father from our own oak tree, said it was justice for cattle rustling, but everyone knew the truth. Catherine's hand found his, their fingers intertwining naturally. I'm so sorry. I was 15, Quinn continued. Too young to fight back then. My mother and I left with nothing but the clothes on our backs. She died 2 years later, worked to death as a laundress in Kansas City. His eyes met Catherine's. I promised myself I'd never stand by and watch that happen to anyone else. When I found out what Hartley was doing to the Petersons, the Williams family before them. You couldn't look away, Catherine finished for him. No, Quinn agreed. I couldn't. The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken understanding. Without conscious thought, Catherine found herself leaning closer to him. Quinn's hand rose to gently touch her cheek, his eyes asking a question his lips didn't form. The crack of a rifle shot shattered the moment, sending splinters flying from the log wall inches from Catherine's head. They both ducked instinctively. Found you, Maxwell's voice called from the tree line. Come out with those papers, Ingram, and maybe the lady doesn't have to get hurt. Quinn pulled Catherine down beside him, shielding her with his body despite his wounds. 3 of them, he whispered, spread out from the sound of it. Catherine's mind raced. There's only one approach from that direction. The ravine behind us is too steep to climb quickly. Give us the girl and the documents, Maxwell shouted. You can ride away, Ingram. We don't need to kill you. He's lying, Catherine whispered. Quinn nodded grimly, checking his ammunition. I know, I've got 6 bullets, not enough if they rush us. Catherine reached for her own weapon. I have the shotgun, 5 shells. Another shot struck the wall, sending more splinters flying. Last chance, Maxwell called. Quinn met Catherine's eyes, a decision forming. Listen to me carefully, he said in a low voice. When I start shooting, you run for the ravine. There's a game trail halfway down, follow it east until you reach the river. I'm not leaving you, Catherine protested. You have to, Quinn insisted. Take the evidence, complete what I started. Before Catherine could argue further, Quinn turned and fired 2 quick shots toward their attackers, forcing them to duck for cover. Go, he urged, firing again. Now, torn between her promise and her growing feelings for him, Catherine hesitated only a moment before grabbing the saddlebags. With one last anguished look at Quinn, she darted toward the ravine, the sound of gunfire echoing behind her. The descent was treacherous, loose rocks sliding beneath her feet as she half ran, half slid down the steep incline. Bullets whined overhead as at least one of Maxwell's men spotted her escape. She reached the game trail Quinn had mentioned and ran eastward, her lungs burning with exertion and fear. The gunfire behind her intensified, then suddenly stopped altogether. The silence was somehow more terrifying than the shooting had been. Had Quinn been captured, killed? The thought made her stumble, nearly losing her footing on the narrow trail. Catherine had traveled perhaps half a mile when she heard the sounds of pursuit, someone crashing through the underbrush behind her. She quickened her pace, the heavy saddlebags slapping against her side as she ran. The trail curved around a massive boulder and Catherine pressed herself against it, shotgun ready. As the footsteps grew closer, she steeled herself to fire. But when a familiar figure limped into view, she nearly cried out with relief. Quinn. He was bleeding from a fresh wound on his arm, his face deathly pale but alive. "Keep moving," he gasped. "Maxwell's right behind me. The others are circling around to cut us off." Catherine supported him as they continued down the trail, which grew increasingly steep and narrow. The canyon walls rose on either side, offering few options for escape. "There," Quinn pointed ahead where the ravine widened slightly. "That outcropping. We can make a stand there." It wasn't much, just a rocky shelf offering minimal cover, but it was defensible from one direction at least. They had barely reached it when the first of their pursuers appeared on the trail behind them. "I've got 3 shots left," Quinn said, positioning himself behind the largest boulder. "Make your shells count." Catherine nodded grimly, taking up position beside him. "How did you get away?" A ghost of a smile touched Quinn's lips. "Played dead. When the youngest one came to check, I surprised him. The others scattered for cover, gave me just enough time to follow you." The first shot came without warning, chipping stone near Quinn's head. He returned fire methodically, forcing their attacker to retreat momentarily. "That's Maxwell," he said. "The other 2 must be trying to get above us." As if confirming his words, loose stones clattered down from the canyon rim, and a second gunman appeared on the edge above them. "We're trapped," Catherine realized, her heart sinking. Quinn met her gaze, something unspoken passing between them. "If we don't make it," he began. "We will," Catherine interrupted, unwilling to accept defeat. "If we don't," Quinn insisted, "I need you to know. Meeting you has been worth all of this." "I never expected." The crack of a rifle interrupted his words, but the shot wasn't directed at them. From somewhere, upstream, came a chorus of war cries, followed by more gunfire. Maxwell shouted in alarm. "What in God's name?" Quinn whispered, peering cautiously around their cover. To their astonishment, a group of mounted Crow warriors had appeared in the canyon, their rifles trained on Maxwell and his men. Leading them was a distinguished older man whose raised hand had apparently halted the initial volley. "Hold your fire," the Crow leader called out in clear English. "We have no quarrel with you if you leave our hunting grounds peacefully." Maxwell's response was predictably defiant. "This ain't your land anymore, Chief. Treaty says so." The Crow leader's expression remained impassive. "The paper speaks one way, but the mountains and rivers speak another. You pursue these 2 across our ancestral lands." "Why?" Catherine made a decision. Standing slowly, she called out, "Chief Running Fox." The Crow leader turned, surprise registering on his weathered face as he recognized her. "Healing woman, what brings you here in danger?" Catherine stepped forward, Quinn protectively at her side despite his weakened state. "These men hunt us because we carry proof of their crimes against innocent settlers." She raised the saddlebags. "Murder, theft, corruption." Running Fox nodded thoughtfully. "The dark-haired one there," he pointed at Maxwell. "I know this man. His hunters have killed our deer out of season, threatened our young men who protested." Maxwell's face contorted with rage. "This is territorial business. You savages have no right to interfere." The slur visibly angered the Crow warriors, several raising their rifles again. Running Fox silenced them with a gesture. "We have every right to protect those who have shown respect to our people," the chief replied calmly. To Catherine, he added, "Your mother healed my son many winters ago. You have continued her good work, bringing medicine when our children were sick last season." Catherine nodded respectfully. "The debt was mine. for all your people taught her." Running Fox turned to Maxwell and his men, his decision made. "You will leave these two alone. Go back to your master and tell him the Crow Nation stands against his evil." The standoff stretched taut as a bowstring, Maxwell clearly calculating his odds against nearly a dozen armed warriors. Finally, with a vicious curse, he lowered his weapon. "This ain't over," he spat. "Not by a long shot." "For today, it is," Running Fox replied evenly, with murderous glares. Maxwell and his men retreated back up the canyon. The tension in the air remained until they disappeared from sight. Only then did Quinn sway dangerously, his strength finally giving out completely. Catherine caught him before he could fall, alarmed at the heat radiating from his skin. "He needs help," she told Running Fox urgently. "He's been shot, and the fever is worsening." The chief dismounted, examining Quinn with experienced eyes. "Bring him to our camp," he decided. "Our medicine man will tend to his wounds." "We're trying to reach Fort Benton," Catherine explained as warriors carefully lifted Quinn onto one of their horses. "We have evidence that must reach the federal marshal there." Running Fox nodded. "When he is stronger, we will guide you. The journey is dangerous, especially now that these men know your destination." Catherine mounted behind Quinn, supporting his semi-conscious form as they began moving northward. "Thank you," she said sincerely to Running Fox. "You saved our lives." The chief rode alongside her. "Many winters ago, your mother saved my son. Today, we are repaying that debt." His weathered face softened slightly. She would be proud of her daughter's courage. Tears pricked Catherine's eyes at the unexpected kindness. As they rode toward the Crow encampment, she held Quinn securely, his head resting against her shoulder. Despite the danger still pursuing them, for the first time since this journey began, Catherine allowed herself to hope they might actually succeed, and perhaps find something even more precious along the way. The Crow encampment nestled in a sheltered valley, alongside a clear running stream, a collection of tipis arranged in the traditional circle. Women paused in their work to watch curiously as the hunting party returned with unexpected guests. Children peeked from behind their mothers' skirts, pointing and whispering at the sight of Catherine supporting the barely conscious Quinn. Running Fox led them directly to a tipi slightly larger than the others, decorated with painted symbols Catherine recognized as those of a medicine man. An elderly crow emerged, his face deeply lined with age and wisdom. "Spotted Elk," Running Fox explained, "our most skilled healer." The old man examined Quinn without speaking, his experienced hands gentle as he probed the wounds. Finally, he looked up at Catherine and spoke in the Crow language. Running Fox translated. "The bullet wound festers. He will make medicine, but you must help prepare it." Catherine nodded gratefully. "I know some of your healing ways. Tell me what to do." For the next several hours, she worked alongside Spotted Elk, grinding herbs, heating water, and carefully cleaning Quinn's wounds. The bullet had not emerged, and the medicine man extracted it with remarkable skill using tools Catherine had never seen before. Throughout the painful procedure, Quinn remained mercifully unconscious, his body battling both trauma and infection. When they had done all they could, Spotted Elk motioned for Catherine to sit beside the sleeping Quinn. "Now we wait," Running Fox translated. "The night will decide if his spirit stays or journeys onward." Catherine settled beside Quinn, gently bathing his forehead with cool water. "I won't leave him," she promised. As darkness fell outside the tipi, Running Fox's wife, Gray Dove, brought food and fresh water. She spoke softly to Catherine in broken English. "You care for this man, more than healer cares for patient," the older woman observed with gentle wisdom. Catherine didn't deny it, I barely know him, she admitted, yet I feel as though I've known him always. Gray Dove smiled. Sometimes the heart sees what is hidden from the eyes. She touched Catherine's hand. Rest now, I will watch with you. Throughout the long night, Catherine dozed fitfully, waking often to check on Quinn. His fever raged, his body fighting the infection that threatened to claim him. She spoke to him during his moments of semi-consciousness. Words of encouragement and stories of her life, anything to anchor him to the world of the living. Near dawn, when the tipi was bathed in the grayish light of early morning, Quinn's fever finally broke. Catherine, exhausted from her vigil, had fallen asleep with her hand clasping his. She awakened to the sensation of his fingers gently squeezing hers. "Catherine," he whispered, his voice hoarse but his eyes clear for the first time in days. Joy surged through her as she leaned closer. "You're back." Quinn managed a weak smile. "Didn't go far, you kept calling me home." The simple words held depths that made Catherine's heart flutter. "How do you feel?" "Like I've been trampled by a herd of buffalo," he admitted. "But alive." "Where are we?" "Safe for now," Catherine explained. "The Crow are protecting us. Their medicine man saved your life." Quinn's eyes widened slightly as he took in their surroundings. "We're in a Crow camp and they're helping us." "Old debts and new alliances," Catherine said. Running Fox knows of Hartley's men trespassing on their hunting grounds, and his son was once saved by my mother's medicine. Quinn absorbed this information, then asked the question that clearly worried him most. "The evidence?" "Safe," Catherine assured him, patting the saddlebags that hadn't left her side. "Once you're stronger, they've promised to guide us to Fort Benton." Relief washed over Quinn's features. "Thank you," he said softly, "for everything. Most people would have left me to die." "I'm not most people," Catherine replied with a small smile. Quinn's hand reached up to touch her cheek, his fingers gentle against her skin. "No, you most certainly are not." His eyes held hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Catherine," the tippy flap opened, interrupting whatever Quinn had been about to say. Spotted Elk entered, followed by Running Fox. The medicine man examined Quinn carefully, nodding with satisfaction at his improved condition. "He says you are stronger than he expected," Running Fox translated. "Your spirit fought hard to stay in this world." Quinn glanced at Catherine. "I had something worth fighting for." The medicine man prepared a bitter-smelling tea and instructed Catherine to make sure Quinn drank it regularly. "For strength and to fight the remaining sickness," Running Fox explained. After they left, Catherine helped Quinn sit up enough to drink the medicine. Though still weak, he was visibly improving hour by hour. "How long until we can travel again?" he asked. "At least 2 more days," Catherine answered firmly. "You nearly died, Quinn. You need to regain your strength." He didn't argue, which told Catherine just how badly his body had been affected by the ordeal. Instead, he asked, "Tell me about your life." "Before a bleeding cowboy showed up on your doorstep." Catherine settled beside him, surprisingly comfortable with sharing her story. "I was born in Marysville. My father came west as a trapper, met my mother when she was traveling with a group of settlers. She had knowledge of plants and healing that fascinated him." A fond smile touched her lips. "He always said he fell in love with her when she saved his hunting dog from a rattlesnake bite." "Seems healing runs in your family," Quinn observed. Catherine nodded. "My mother learned from everyone: settlers, travelers, native healers. She passed that knowledge to me." Her expression grew more somber. "She died when I was 16, pneumonia. Despite everything she knew about healing others, we couldn't save her." Quinn's hand found hers again. "I'm sorry." "My father never really recovered from losing her," Catherine continued after a moment. "He kept trapping, but the joy had gone out of him. 3 years ago, his heart gave out while checking his lines. I found him." She swallowed hard at the memory. "Since then, it's just been me. I grow medicinal herbs, make remedies for folks in town. It's a quiet life." "Lonely?" Quinn asked gently. Catherine hadn't allowed herself to acknowledge the loneliness that had become her constant companion. "Sometimes," she admitted, "but I've grown used to my own company." "You deserve more," Quinn said softly. Their eyes met, and for a moment Catherine allowed herself to imagine what more might look like: a shared life, companionship, perhaps even love. But reality intruded quickly. "First, we need to get you well and deliver that evidence," she reminded him practically. "Everything else." She left the thought unfinished. The next 2 days passed in relative peace. Quinn grew stronger under the combined care of Catherine and Spotted Elk. The Crow treated them with respectful hospitality, and Catherine found herself appreciating the sense of community that permeated the camp, something she had missed without fully realizing it. On the evening of the second day, Running Fox called a council meeting to discuss their journey to Fort Benton. Catherine and Quinn were invited to attend. "Maxwell and his men still search for you," the chief informed them as they gathered around the central fire. "Our hunters have spotted them to the east and south. They're watching the main trails to Fort Benton," Quinn surmised. "They know where we're headed." Running Fox nodded. "The rivers run high with spring melt. Most crossings are dangerous now." A younger warrior spoke up. "We could guide them through the high passes. The white men do not know those trails." "Too slow," another objected. "The wounded one cannot ride such difficult paths for many days." Catherine listened carefully, understanding the dilemma. Every land route to Fort Benton would either be watched by Maxwell's men or too difficult for Quinn in his weakened state. "What about the river itself?" she suggested suddenly. "Could we travel downstream?" A murmur of interest ran through the gathering. Running Fox considered the idea. "The Missouri is swift but navigable," he acknowledged. 3 days by canoe to Fort Benton if the weather holds." "And Maxwell wouldn't expect us to take the water route," Quinn added, growing animated at the possibility. "They'll be watching the trails, not the river." The decision was quickly made. 2 warriors would guide them to a point on the Missouri River where they could secure a canoe. From there, Catherine and Quinn would continue alone, as the Crow were reluctant to approach Fort Benton itself, where their reception might be hostile. As the council dispersed, Quinn pulled Catherine aside, his eyes serious in the flickering firelight. "Are you certain about this? The river can be dangerous, especially during spring floods." Catherine met his gaze steadily. "I'm certain about seeing this through to the end." "We've come too far to turn back now." Quinn studied her face, something unspoken passing between them. "You're the most remarkable woman I've ever known," he said finally. "When this is over." "When this is over," Catherine echoed softly, allowing herself to hope for the first time. The moment stretched between them, intimate despite the bustle of the camp around them. Slowly, hesitantly, Quinn leaned forward. Catherine's heart raced as his lips met hers in a gentle, questioning kiss. It was brief, little more than a whisper of contact, but it sent warmth flooding through her. When they parted, Quinn's eyes held a promise that needed no words. "Tomorrow," he said simply. Catherine nodded. "Tomorrow." They departed at first light, mounted on horses provided by the Crow. 2 young warriors led them through a series of hidden valleys and narrow passes, carefully avoiding the more traveled routes where Maxwell's men might be watching. Quinn rode alone now, still weakened but able to manage the gentle pace their guide set. By midday, they reached a wide bend in the Missouri River. Concealed in the undergrowth was a sturdy canoe, apparently placed there through prior arrangement. "Our people trade along the river," explained one of the warriors. "The boat is sound." As they transferred their supplies to the canoe, Catherine felt a mixture of gratitude and trepidation. The river flowed swiftly, its surface deceptively smooth but hiding currents that could challenge even experienced boatmen. Running Fox had sent gifts: dried meat, additional medicines for Quinn's wounds, and a small carved stone bear that the chief explained was for protection. Catherine tucked it carefully into her pocket, touched by the gesture. Their crow guides pointed out landmarks that would help them navigate. "Where the river bends sharply west, be cautious," one warned. "Rapids there. Stay to the eastern shore." With final expressions of gratitude, Catherine and Quinn pushed off into the current. The canoe rocked momentarily, then steadied as Quinn, sitting in the stern, guided them into the main channel. Catherine, positioned in the bow, watched the Crow warriors grow smaller on the shore before finally disappearing as the river curved around a forested hill. They were alone again, their fate now tied to the flowing waters of the Missouri. "Can you handle a paddle?" Quinn asked, noting how Catherine studied the river ahead. She nodded confidently. "My father taught me. We used to fish the smaller rivers near Marysville." Together they established a rhythm, working in tandem to guide the canoe through the swift current. The day was clear, the spring sun warming their backs as they made steady progress downstream. The river valley opened before them, spectacular vistas of rugged cliffs and pine-covered slopes that would have been beautiful under different circumstances. They spoke little, conserving their energy for paddling and remaining vigilant for any signs of pursuit. By late afternoon, they had covered an impressive distance, the river having carried them far from their starting point. "We should find a place to camp soon," Catherine suggested, noting Quinn's increasing fatigue. Despite his determination, his recent wounds still limited his stamina. Quinn reluctantly agreed. "There's a suitable spot ahead." He pointed to a small, sheltered cove where the river widened slightly. They guided the canoe toward shore, the bow gently grinding against the sandy bank. Catherine stepped out first, securing the craft while Quinn gathered their supplies. The small clearing above the shoreline offered protection from the wind and visibility of the river in both directions, ideal for their needs. As Catherine prepared a small fire, Quinn checked their position against the crude map Running Fox had drawn for them. "We've made good time," he reported. "Another 2 days should bring us to Fort Benton if the current remains favorable." Catherine nodded, relief evident in her expression. "And Maxwell?" "No sign of them," Quinn confirmed. "I think our plan worked. They're watching the trails while we slip past by river." The tension that had been Catherine's constant companion began to ease slightly. She busied herself preparing a simple meal from their provisions, conscious of Quinn watching her with an expression she couldn't quite interpret. "What is it?" she finally asked. Quinn seemed to debate with himself before speaking. "I've been thinking about what happens after Fort Benton, after we deliver the evidence." Catherine's hand stilled. This was the conversation they'd been avoiding, the question of what came next. "Hartley will face justice," she said carefully. "His operation will be dismantled." "Yes," Quinn agreed, "but I meant, what happens to us?" The word "us" hung in the air between them, filled with possibility. Catherine found herself unable to meet his gaze, suddenly afraid of hoping for too much. "I don't know," she admitted softly. "I hadn't thought beyond reaching Fort Benton." Quinn moved closer, his hand gently turning her face toward his. "I have." The intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. "Quinn, before all this, I was just a ranch foreman with nowhere to call home," he continued. "Nothing to my name but a horse and saddle. I have no right to ask anything of you." "Ask anyway," Catherine whispered. Quinn took her hand in his. "When this is over, I don't want to say goodbye. I know it's fast, maybe foolish given how little time we've known each other." But these days with you. He shook his head, struggling to find the right words. I've never met anyone like you, Catherine. Brave, kind, stubborn as hell. A small smile touched her lips at the last descriptor. I'm not offering much, Quinn continued earnestly. Just myself. A chance to see if what's growing between us might become something permanent. Catherine's heart raced at his words. She had lived so long in isolation, focused on survival, that the prospect of sharing her life terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. I have a small ranch, she found herself saying. My father's land. It's not much, 50 acres, a cabin that needs work, but it's mine, free and clear. Hope dawned in Quinn's eyes. Are you saying? I'm saying I don't want to say goodbye either, Catherine admitted, finally giving voice to the feelings that had been growing since that stormy night when a wounded cowboy collapsed on her porch. I'm saying maybe we could build something. Together. Quinn's smile transformed his face, erasing the worry and pain of recent days. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he drew her closer. This time, when their lips met, the kiss held nothing of hesitation, only certainty and promise. When they finally parted, Catherine rested her forehead against his. We still have to reach Fort Benton, she reminded him, practical even in this moment. We will, Quinn assured her. Together. They spent the evening by the small fire, sharing stories and tentative dreams for a future neither had imagined possible days earlier. For the first time since beginning their journey, they allowed themselves to believe they might actually succeed, not just in bringing Hartley to justice, but in finding unexpected happiness along the way. As night settled over the river valley, Catherine spread their bedrolls side by side. The stars emerged in brilliant clarity, the Milky Way arching across the sky in a display city dwellers never witnessed. It's beautiful, Quinn murmured, gazing upward as they lay beside each other. Catherine nodded, suddenly overwhelmed by the vastness above them and the intimacy of the moment. In Crow belief, those lights are the spirits of ancestors watching over the living. Quinn's hand found hers between their bedrolls. I'd like to think my parents would approve of you, he said softly. And mine of you, Catherine replied, squeezing his fingers gently. They fell asleep that way, hands linked beneath the star-scattered sky, momentarily at peace, despite the dangers that still awaited them downstream. The peace proved short-lived. Dawn brought low-hanging clouds and a change in the river's temperament. What had been a steady, manageable current the previous day had transformed overnight into a swollen, debris-laden torrent. Heavy rains upstream had fed the Missouri's waters, creating conditions far more treacherous than they had anticipated. We should wait it out, Catherine suggested as they surveyed the churning waters. Give the river time to settle. Quinn shook his head grimly. We can't afford the delay. Maxwell and his men are still searching. The longer we stay in one place, the greater the risk they'll find us. He was right, Catherine knew. Every hour increased the danger of discovery, yet the river in its present state posed its own deadly threat. We'll stay close to the shore, Quinn decided, studying the roiling current. It will be slower going but safer than mid-channel. They loaded the canoe with care, securing their supplies and the precious evidence against the likelihood of rough water ahead. Quinn, insisted Catherine, were the only life vest they found stored in the canoe, overriding her protests with quiet determination. I've swum across cattle ponds in flash floods, he assured her with forced lightness. This isn't much different. Catherine knew he was minimizing the danger for her benefit, but recognized the necessity of continuing their journey. With a silent prayer for safe passage, she took her position in the bow as Quinn pushed them off from shore. Immediately, the current seized the canoe, pulling them faster than either had anticipated. Quinn's strong arms strained with the paddle, fighting to keep them from being swept into the center of the river where submerged logs and debris created deadly hazards. "Left," Catherine called, spotting a partially submerged tree trunk in their path. They swerved, narrowly avoiding collision. For the next hour, they fought the river in grim silence, every sense focused on navigating the treacherous waters. Despite the cool morning, sweat beaded on Quinn's forehead from the exertion of controlling their course. The river narrowed as they approached a bend, the current accelerating dangerously. Too late, Catherine recognized the rapids their crow guides had warned them about. "Quinn!" she shouted over the roar of water. "Rapids ahead!" There was no time to reach shore. The canoe shot forward, caught in the powerful flow that pulled them inexorably toward the churning white water. Quinn shouted instructions that were lost in the thunderous noise of the river. The first impact came without warning. The canoe struck a submerged rock, spinning violently. Catherine clung to the sides, fighting to maintain her balance as spray drenched them both. Quinn's face was a mask of concentration as he battled to regain control. For a brief, hopeful moment, it seemed they might navigate the worst of it. Then disaster struck. A massive log, carried by the current, slammed into the side of their canoe with devastating force. The craft tilted sharply, then capsized completely. Catherine was thrown into the frigid water, the shock of it driving the breath from her lungs. The life vest kept her afloat, but the current tumbled her mercilessly, disorienting her completely. She fought to surface, gasping for air when she finally broke free of the water's grip. "Quinn!" she screamed, scanning the churning river desperately. For an agonizing moment, she saw nothing but foam and debris. Then, perhaps 30 yards downstream, she glimpsed him clinging to the overturned canoe with one arm, the other still clutching their precious saddlebags. Catherine swam toward him with powerful strokes, fighting the current that sought to separate them further. When she reached the canoe, Quinn's face was pale with cold and exertion, but relief flooded his eyes at the sight of her. "The shore," he gasped, nodding toward the eastern bank. "We need to get out of the water." Together they kicked, using the canoe for support as they gradually angled toward land. The current fought them every inch of the way, but determination lent strength to their efforts. After what seemed an eternity, Catherine's feet touched bottom. With the last of their combined strength, they dragged themselves and the damaged canoe onto the rocky shore. They collapsed side by side on the bank, chests heaving, bodies trembling with cold and exhaustion. Quinn still clutched the saddlebags, having somehow managed to keep them above water throughout the ordeal. "The evidence?" Catherine asked between gasping breaths. Quinn checked the oilskin wrapping inside. "Safe," he confirmed. "Mostly dry." Catherine laughed weakly with relief, the sound containing an edge of hysteria she quickly suppressed. "We lost most of our supplies," she noted, surveying the scattered contents washing up on the shoreline. Quinn nodded grimly. "Food, medicine, extra ammunition, all gone." "But we're alive," Catherine reminded him, reaching for his hand. "Thanks to you," Quinn replied, his eyes meeting hers with naked emotion. "If you hadn't insisted on the life vest..." Catherine squeezed his fingers. "We saved each other, that's what matters." After recovering what little of their supplies had washed ashore, they assessed their situation. The canoe had survived but was damaged. A long crack ran along one side where the log had struck it. "Can we repair it?" Catherine asked, examining the split wood. Quinn inspected it carefully. "Not properly, not without tools, but we might make it serviceable enough to continue downriver." Using strips torn from Catherine's petticoat and pine sap collected from nearby trees, they fashioned a crude but effective patch for the damaged canoe. It wouldn't hold forever, but it might last long enough to reach Fort Benton. Their more immediate concern was warming themselves before hypothermia set in. While Quinn finished the repairs, Catherine gathered wood for a fire, grateful that her father had taught her to keep flint and steel in a waterproof pouch tied to her belt. Soon, a small blaze crackled on the shore, its heat a blessing against their sodden clothes and chilled skin. "We should dry out before continuing," Quinn suggested, spreading their salvaged possessions near the fire. "The current won't ease, but at least we'll be warmer." Catherine nodded agreement, shivering despite the fire's warmth. Without hesitation, Quinn moved beside her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. The simple gesture of shared body heat carried deeper meaning now, and she leaned into his embrace gratefully. "How much farther to Fort Benton?" she asked, studying the unfamiliar shoreline. Quinn considered. "Hard to tell exactly. The river's twists make distance deceptive, but I'd guess another day and a half, maybe less with this current. If our repairs hold," Catherine added, eyeing the patched canoe dubiously. "They'll hold," Quinn assured her with more confidence than the makeshift repair warranted. "We've come too far to fail now." As their clothes steamed by the fire, they took stock of their remaining supplies. The situation was grim enough food for perhaps one day. A single blanket, Quinn's revolver with 4 remaining bullets, and of course, the evidence that had driven their journey from the beginning. "We'll manage," Catherine said firmly, refusing to surrender to despair. "The river provides fish, edible plants along the shore. We won't starve before reaching Fort Benton." Quinn smiled at her optimism. "You would have made a fine pioneer, Catherine Zimmerman." "I am a pioneer," she reminded him. "We all are out here." The day advanced as they recovered their strength and allowed their clothes to dry as much as possible. By mid-afternoon, they were ready to continue their journey, launching the repaired canoe with cautious optimism. The river remained swollen but had lost some of its earlier fury. Their progress was steady, both of them now acutely aware of the dangers concealed beneath the water's surface. When dusk approached, they found a suitable campsite on a high bank, safely above the river's reach should it rise further during the night. Their meal was meager, the last of the crow's dried meat shared between them. But as they sat beside yet another small fire, the day's dangers behind them, Catherine found herself surprisingly content. "We almost died today," she reflected, gazing into the flames. Quinn nodded soberly. "Not the first time this week. Yet here we sit, making plans for a future neither of us imagined a week ago." Catherine shook her head in wonder. "Life can change so quickly." "For better or worse," Quinn agreed. His hand found hers, fingers intertwining naturally now. "Mostly better, since meeting you." Catherine's heart swelled at his words. She had lived so long in isolation that the depth of her feelings for this man frightened her even as it filled her with joy. They had known each other mere days, yet faced death together multiple times, forging a bond that might take years to develop under ordinary circumstances. "Tell me more about your plans," she requested, "after justice is served. What did you imagine for yourself before Hartley's crimes changed everything?" Quinn was silent for a moment, his thumb tracing gentle patterns on the back of her hand. "I always wanted land of my own," he finally said. "Not a grand spread like Hartley's, just enough to run a modest herd, build something lasting, something honest." "And now," Catherine prompted softly, his eyes met hers across the flickering firelight, "now I want to build that with you, if you'll have me." The simple declaration, spoken without flowery words or grand gestures, touched Catherine more deeply than any formal proposal could have. This was the real language of the frontier, direct, honest, and born of practical considerations as much as emotional ones. Yet the emotion was there, unmistakable in Quinn's steady gaze. "I would like that very much," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Quinn's smile transformed his travel-worn face. He leaned forward, his lips meeting hers in a kiss that sealed their informal agreement more effectively than any written contract. When they parted, Catherine added practically, "But first, Fort Benton. Justice for the Petersons and the others." "First Fort Benton," Quinn agreed. "Then our future." They slept that night beneath their single salvaged blanket, huddled together for warmth. Despite their precarious circumstances, Catherine fell asleep with a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The final day of their river journey dawned clear and cool. The Missouri had settled somewhat overnight, though the current remained swift enough to carry them rapidly downstream. Their patched canoe leaked slowly but manageably, requiring occasional stops to bail water and reinforce the repair. By midday, the character of the shoreline began to change. Occasional cabins appeared on the banks, then small clusters of buildings, outposts, and trading posts that heralded their approach to civilization. "We're close," Quinn observed as they passed a woodcutter's camp where men paused in their work to watch the canoe glide by. Catherine nodded, anxiety and anticipation mingling as their destination neared. "What's our plan once we reach Fort Benton?" Marshal James Thornton, Quinn replied. "He's stationed there permanently, not under territorial jurisdiction. Hartley can't touch him." "You're certain he'll help?" "As certain as I can be," Quinn admitted. "He has a reputation for honesty, and these documents," he patted the saddlebags, "speak for themselves." Fort Benton appeared on the horizon late that afternoon, a bustling river port that served as gateway to the Northern Territories. Steamboats lined the levee, loading and unloading cargo. The fort itself stood on a bluff overlooking the settlement, the American flag visible even from a distance. They guided their battered canoe toward a small dock away from the main shipping area, wanting to avoid immediate notice. As they secured the craft, Catherine surveyed their appearance critically. "We look like drowned rats," she observed wryly. Both were disheveled from days of river travel, their clothes stained and worn. Quinn grinned. "Not exactly the impression I hope to make on a federal marshal." "The evidence matters more than our appearance," Catherine reminded him. "Let's find Marshal Thornton before word of our arrival spreads." They moved through the busy streets cautiously, Quinn's hand never straying far from his gun. Fort Benton was a frontier town in every sense, saloons and trading posts doing brisk business, miners and trappers mingling with settlers and steamboat crews. No one paid particular attention to two travel-worn strangers, for which Catherine was grateful. The marshal's office stood on the main street, a solidly built structure with barred windows and a wooden sign identifying its purpose. Quinn paused outside, his expression suddenly uncertain. "What is it?" Catherine asked, concerned by his hesitation. "Just realizing how much depends on the next few minutes," Quinn replied quietly. "If Thornton isn't the man I've been led to believe." Catherine took his hand firmly in hers. "Then we'll find another way. We've come too far to turn back now." Drawing strength from her confidence, Quinn pushed open the door. Inside, a lean, gray-haired man looked up from paperwork spread across a solid oak desk. His weathered face registered mild curiosity at their appearance. "Help you folks?" he inquired, setting down his pen. Quinn stepped forward. "Marshal Thornton, my name is Quinn Ingram. I've come a long way to speak with you about Jasper Hartley and what he's been doing in Marysvale County." The marshal's expression sharpened instantly, his casual demeanor falling away. "Hartley." "The rancher." "The murderer," Quinn corrected, removing the documents from the saddlebags. I have evidence of multiple killings, land theft, corruption of local officials, all of it documented here. Thornton rose, gesturing toward a closed door at the back of the office. In here, both of you. Once inside the private office, Quinn spread the documents on Thornton's desk, ledgers, maps, and letters that detailed years of Hartley's criminal activities. As the marshal examined them, his expression grew increasingly grim. "I've heard rumors about Hartley for years," Thornton admitted. "But nothing substantial enough to act on. This." He held up a page detailing payments to Sheriff Davis. "This is exactly what I've needed." Hope surged through Catherine. "Then you'll help." "I'll do more than help," Thornton promised. "I'll wire the territorial governor immediately. We'll have federal deputies dispatched to Marysvale within days." He studied them more closely. "But you two look like you've been through hell to bring this information. What's your story?" Between them, Catherine and Quinn related their harrowing journey: the initial confrontation with Hartley, Quinn's wounding, their escape via the Crow lands, and finally the perilous river journey. Throughout the telling, Thornton listened intently, occasionally making notes. "Hartley's men, Maxwell and the others, are still searching for us," Quinn concluded. "They know the evidence would destroy them." Thornton nodded grimly. "You'll both stay here under federal protection until this is resolved. I've got spare rooms upstairs. Not fancy, but safe." Relief washed over Catherine. After days of constant danger, the prospect of safety, even temporary, felt almost unreal. "How long will it take?" she asked. "To bring Hartley to justice?" "The wheels of justice grind slow, but they grind fine," Thornton replied. "With evidence this solid, I'd say Hartley's days of freedom are numbered in weeks, not months." As darkness fell over Fort Benton, Catherine and Quinn found themselves in the promised rooms above the marshal's office. Simple but clean, with actual beds and private wash basins, luxuries after their wilderness journey. Thornton had even provided fresh clothing and a hot meal, for which they were pathetically grateful. Clean and fed for the first time in days, Catherine stood by the window of her room, gazing out at the lights of Fort Benton. A soft knock at the connecting door announced Quinn's presence. "May I come in?" he asked. Catherine opened the door, smiling at the transformation. Freshly shaved and dressed in borrowed clothes, Quinn looked almost like a different man, though his eyes held the same intensity when they met hers. "We did it," he said softly, moving to stand beside her at the window. "We did," Catherine agreed, marveling at the improbability of their success. "The Petersons will have justice, and Hartley will hang," Quinn added with quiet satisfaction. "As will Maxwell, most likely." They stood in companionable silence, watching the bustling frontier town below. After days of danger and urgency, the sudden calm felt almost disconcerting. "What happens now?" Catherine finally asked, voicing the question that had been forming between them. Quinn turned to face her fully. Now we wait for Thornton to complete his investigation, give our formal statements, eventually testify against Hartley and his men. And after that," Catherine pressed gently. Quinn's expression softened. His hand rose to touch her cheek, the gesture now familiar and cherished. "After that, if you still want it, we go home, to your land, our land." "I still want it," Catherine assured him, covering his hand with her own. "It won't be easy," Quinn cautioned. "Building something from scratch rarely is, but together." His voice held a certainty that warmed her heart. "Together," Catherine echoed, stepping closer to him. "We've faced worse odds already." Quinn's arms encircled her waist, drawing her against him. The embrace felt like coming home, a sensation Catherine had almost forgotten was possible. His lips found hers in a kiss that held both tenderness and promise, sealing their commitment without need for further words. Later that night, Lying in an actual bed for the first time in days, Catherine reflected on the extraordinary turn her life had taken. A week ago, she had been alone in her cabin, her existence defined by routine and solitude. Now she stood on the threshold of a new life, one filled with purpose and companionship, perhaps even love, all because she had opened her door to a wounded cowboy on a stormy night. The territorial governor moved with surprising speed once Marshal Thornton presented Quinn's evidence. Within a week, a detachment of federal deputies had been dispatched to Marysvale with warrants for Jasper Hartley, Vance Maxwell, and a dozen others implicated in the documents. Catherine and Quinn remained in Fort Benton under Thornton's protection, providing detailed statements and awaiting news from Marysvale. The enforced inactivity chafed at them both, accustomed as they were to self-reliance and constant vigilance. "Patience," Thornton counseled when Quinn expressed frustration at the delay. "Justice moves at its own pace." Finally, 10 days after their arrival in Fort Benton, a telegram arrived from the deputy marshal who had led the Marysvale expedition. Thornton summoned them to his office immediately, his expression triumphant as he read the message aloud. Hartley and 6 associates apprehended at Main Ranch. Maxwell killed resisting arrest. Sheriff Davis in custody for corruption. Evidence secured from Hartley's safe confirms Ingram's documents, awaiting transport to territorial capital for trial. Local citizens providing additional testimonies of abuses. Quinn exhaled slowly, the tension he'd carried for weeks finally easing. "It's really over." "Not entirely," Thornton cautioned. "There's still the trial. Both of you will need to testify." "When?" Catherine asked. "The circuit judge arrives in Helena next month," Thornton explained. "Given the severity of the charges, Hartley's trial will likely be prioritized." "A month," Quinn repeated, glancing at Catherine. "That gives us time." "Time for what?" Thornton asked. Quinn's eyes never left Catherine's face as he answered. "Time to go home, start rebuilding. We can return to Helena when needed for the trial." Understanding dawned on Thornton's weathered features. "I see. Well, I've no authority to keep you here now that your statements are recorded, though I'd advise caution. Hartley still has friends who might not appreciate your testimony." "We'll be careful," Catherine promised. "But we need to return to Marysvale. I have property there, animals that need tending." Thornton nodded. "I'll arrange a military escort as far as the territorial road. After that, you're on your own." As they left the marshal's office, Quinn took Catherine's hand, his expression thoughtful. "There's something I need to do before we leave Fort Benton," he said. "Something important." Catherine looked at him questioningly. "Will you come with me?" Quinn asked, simply curious. Catherine nodded. Quinn led her through the bustling streets to a small church near the edge of town. The modest wooden structure stood open, sunlight streaming through plain glass windows to illuminate the simple interior. "Quinn?" Catherine asked, confused by his destination. Instead of answering, Quinn guided her to a bench near the front of the empty church. He sat beside her, suddenly appearing nervous in a way she hadn't seen before, not even when they'd faced armed pursuers. "Catherine," he began, taking both her hands in his. "I know we've spoken of the future of building something together, but I need to make it official." Realization dawned slowly as Quinn continued. "I can't offer you wealth or an easy life, but I can promise to stand beside you through whatever comes, to work the land with you, to protect you with my last breath if needed." His voice grew husky with emotion. "I've known you barely 2 weeks, yet I feel I've known you all my life. If that's madness, then I'm happily mad." Catherine's heart raced as Quinn released her hands only to reach into his pocket. From it, he withdrew a simple gold band clearly purchased recently in Fort Benton. "Catherine Zimmerman, will you marry me?" Become my wife, my partner in everything life brings us." Tears welled in Catherine's eyes, unexpected emotion overwhelming her customary practicality. This man, this honorable, brave, gentle man who had literally bled on her doorstep, was offering her not just companionship but a full partnership, a shared life. Love. "Yes," she whispered, then more strongly. "Yes, Quinn, I will marry you." The smile that illuminated Quinn's face was like sunrise after the darkest night. With slightly trembling hands, he slipped the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit, as though meant to be there always. "The minister can perform the ceremony tomorrow," Quinn said, his voice catching slightly. "If that's not too soon." Catherine laughed softly, joy bubbling up irrepressibly. "After everything we've been through, tomorrow seems an eternity to wait." Quinn's arms encircled her, drawing her close in the quiet sanctuary of the church. His kiss held all the promise of their future, tender yet passionate, sealing their commitment in the most elemental way. They were married the following morning, in a simple ceremony witnessed only by Marshal Thornton and the minister's wife. Catherine wore a borrowed dress, and Quinn a clean shirt purchased from the general store. The lack of finery mattered not at all. The words they spoke to each other held all the solemnity and significance required. "I now pronounce you man and wife," the minister declared, his weathered face creasing in a smile. "What God has joined together, let no man put asunder." Quinn's kiss was different now, a husband's kiss, filled with rightful possession and shared joy. As they signed the marriage certificate, Catherine felt a deep sense of rightness settle over her. The path ahead might hold challenges, but they would face them together, as they had from the moment she'd commanded a bleeding stranger to sit down in her kitchen. 3 days later, they departed Fort Benton with their military escort, a squad of 4 soldiers tasked with seeing them safely to the territorial road. Quinn had purchased a sturdy wagon and team, using funds Marshal Thornton had advanced against the reward money promised for Hartley's capture. Catherine's medical supplies had been replenished, and the wagon bed held seeds, tools, and other necessities for rebuilding their life in Marysvale. The journey home was mercifully uneventful compared to their desperate flight weeks earlier. They traveled openly on established roads. Their marriage and Quinn's officially recognized status as a federal witness, providing protection that would have seemed impossible during their earlier flight. When they finally parted from their military escort at the junction of the territorial road, Catherine felt a momentary apprehension. They were still a day's journey from Marysvale, from home. "Second thoughts?" Quinn asked gently, noting her expression as they made camp that evening. Catherine shook her head. "Not about us, never that, just wondering what we'll find when we return." Quinn nodded, understanding. "Whatever awaits us, we'll face it together." The next day brought them to familiar territory. As they crested the final hill overlooking Marysvale, Catherine felt a surge of emotion at the sight of the small settlement nestled in the valley below. Smoke rose peacefully from chimneys, and even from a distance, they could see people going about their business in the afternoon sun. "Home," she murmured. Quinn reached across the wagon seat to squeeze her hand. "Home," he agreed. Their arrival caused a stir in the small community. Word of Hartley's arrest had spread, of course, but few had connected Catherine Zimmerman to the dramatic events. Seeing her return with Quinn Ingram, the man whose evidence had brought down the most powerful rancher in the territory, created an immediate sensation. They stopped first at the general store for essential supplies. The proprietor, Elijah Wilson, greeted them with undisguised curiosity. "Miss Zimmerman, we thought perhaps you'd left the territory, and Mr. Ingram, there's been much talk about you since the federal deputies came." "It's Mrs. Ingram now," Catherine corrected with quiet pride, displaying her simple gold band. Wilson's eyebrows rose nearly to his hairline. "Well, congratulations indeed. You've both become quite the local heroes, you know. Hartley had half this town under his thumb for years." As they loaded their purchases, other townspeople approached, some offering congratulations on their marriage, others expressing gratitude for Quinn's role in Hartley's downfall. The reception was warmer than either had dared hope for. By late afternoon, they finally turned the wagon onto the narrow track leading to Catherine's now their property. As the cabin came into view, Catherine held her breath, unsure what condition they might find it in after her abrupt departure weeks earlier. To her surprise and relief, the cabin appeared untouched. The garden had grown wild in her absence, but otherwise, everything seemed exactly as she had left it. Even more astonishing, smoke rose from the chimney, indicating someone had maintained a fire. "Someone's there," Quinn observed tensely, his hand moving toward his gun. Before either could react, the cabin door opened, and a familiar figure emerged, Gray Dove, Running Fox's wife, accompanied by a younger Crow woman. "Gray Dove!" Catherine exclaimed, jumping down from the wagon before Quinn could stop her. The older woman smiled broadly. "Healing Woman returns, with her Cowboy," she approached, her hands extended in welcome. "We heard from traders that you reached Fort Benton safely. Running Fox sent us to care for your home until you returned." Catherine embraced the woman gratefully. "How can I ever thank you?" "No thanks needed between friends," Gray Dove replied simply. "We have tended your animals, kept your house. The man who hunted you is dead, the others captured." "All is well," Quinn joined them, nodding respectfully to the Crow women. "Your people have shown us kindness beyond measure." Gray Dove studied them both, her wise eyes noting their linked hands and matching rings. "You are joined now," she observed. "Good. The spirits guided you together for a purpose." The younger woman brought forward a package wrapped in soft hide. "A wedding gift," Gray Dove explained, "from our people to yours." Inside was a beautiful star quilt in shades of blue and white, a treasured gift that Catherine recognized as representing months of skilled labor. "It's beautiful," she whispered, genuinely touched. "Please thank Running Fox and your people for everything they've done." "We will see them again," Quinn added. "Friends are too valuable to lose touch with." After ensuring Catherine's small herd of goats and chickens were indeed thriving, Gray Dove and her companion prepared to depart, promising to visit again when they returned to their winter hunting grounds. Their presence had been an unexpected blessing, one final act of kindness in a journey marked by both danger and unexpected allies. As twilight settled over the land, Catherine and Quinn stood together on the porch of their cabin. The mountains rose majestically in the distance, painted gold and purple by the setting sun. Birds called their evening songs, and somewhere in the nearby woods, a fox barked its presence. "It's not much," Catherine said softly, gesturing toward the modest cabin and the surrounding acres. "But it's ours." Quinn's arm encircled her waist, drawing her close against his side. "It's everything," he corrected. "Land, home, freedom." His lips brushed her temple tenderly. "And you, what more could any man ask for?" Catherine turned in his embrace, raising her face to his. "So no regrets?" "About any of it." Quinn's smile held all the answer she needed, but he spoke the words anyway. "The only thing I regret is that it took a bullet to find you. I'd have preferred a proper introduction." Catherine laughed, her heart full to bursting. "Well, Mr. Ingram, I believe you've been properly introduced now." "Indeed I have, Mrs. Ingram." His expression grew serious despite his smile. "And I intend to spend the rest of my days getting to know you better still." As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Quinn swept Catherine into his arms and carried her across the threshold of their cabin, not as a wounded stranger dependent on her mercy, but as her husband, her partner, her love. The door closed behind them, shutting out the world that had nearly destroyed them both, yet ultimately had brought them together. Inside, firelight welcomed them home, casting golden light on the beginning of their shared future. 1 year later, Catherine stood on the porch of their expanded cabin, watching Quinn return from the fields with their modest herd of cattle. The past 12 months had transformed both their land and their lives in ways she could scarcely have imagined during those desperate days of flight and danger. Hartley's trial had concluded with justice, served a hanging for the rancher who had terrorized so many. Quinn's testimony had been crucial, but equally important were the numerous settlers who finally found courage to speak of abuses suffered under Hartley's regime. The territory had a new sheriff now, one committed to equal justice for all citizens. The reward money for bringing Hartley to justice had allowed them to improve the ranch, substantially adding to their herd, building a proper barn, expanding the cabin to include a second bedroom. The garden thrived under Catherine's care, producing not just food but the medicinal herbs she still prepared for those in need. Their nearest neighbors, the Millers, had become close friends, their children frequent visitors eager for Catherine's stories and Quinn's patient lessons in horsemanship. Running Fox's people stopped regularly during their seasonal migrations, trading and sharing news. Even Marshal Thornton had visited once, bringing news from Fort Benton and marveling at what they'd accomplished in a short time. Life wasn't perfect. The Montana winters were harsh, the work never ending. But it was their life, built with their own hands, filled with purpose and mutual respect that deepened with each passing day into something neither had dared hope for before that fateful stormy night. Quinn dismounted near the porch, his face lighting with the smile that was reserved solely for her. "Everything all right?" he called, noting her thoughtful expression. Catherine nodded, one hand resting unconsciously on her still flat stomach. She hadn't told him yet, wanted to be certain before sharing news that would change their lives yet again. But the signs were unmistakable now. By next spring, their home would welcome a new life, a child born of the love that had begun with a wounded cowboy and a woman brave enough to command. "Sit down. You're not going anywhere." "Everything's perfect," she replied, descending the steps to meet him. Quinn gathered her in his arms, his kiss carrying the same tenderness and passion that had sustained them through every challenge. When they parted, Catherine took his hand and placed it gently against her abdomen. "I have something to tell you," she said softly, watching comprehension dawn in his beloved face. Joy, wonder, and love transformed Quinn's expression as he understood her meaning. "Catherine," he breathed, his voice thick with emotion. "Are you certain?" She nodded, her own eyes filling with happy tears. "Dr. Miller confirmed it yesterday. We're going to have a baby, Quinn. Next spring." Quinn lifted her off her feet in an exuberant embrace, his laughter mingling with hers in the clear Montana air. When he set her down, his hands cradled her face with infinite tenderness. "I never thought I could be this happy," he confessed. "Never thought I deserved it." "You deserve every happiness," Catherine assured him, covering his hands with her own. "We both do." As the sun set behind the mountains, painting their world in hues of gold and promise, Catherine reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them to this moment. From blood and rain and desperate flight to peace and prosperity, and new life, a journey neither could have foreseen, yet one that seemed, in retrospect, somehow inevitable. The cowboy who had arrived at her door bleeding and hunted had become her husband, her partner, the father of her child. The independent woman who had commanded him to stay had found strength not in isolation, but in sharing her life completely with another. Together, they had created something neither could have built alone, not just a home or a ranch, but a life worth fighting for, worth living for, worth loving for. And as Quinn led her back to the cabin they had transformed into a home, Catherine knew with absolute certainty that all of this was merely the beginning of their story.